It was a legend told through generations. As far back as can be remembered, there lived a malignant king who was the incarnation of evil itself. This king sought control over the known world through the omnipotent Triforce, 3 powerful relics created by the golden goddesses, so that he may make and unmake the world as he saw fit. Many times has this legend been told, and in many of those, this king of thieves fails in his quest. In some darker tales, however, the king succeeds in wielding the mighty Triforce and plunges the land into darkness. As the land of Hyrule is overrun by fear, even he must succumb to the forces not meant for just one man, and changes into a big old scary pig man. Hey, it's Password Dots, and today I'm revisiting an old video of mine from my parent channel, Level Select. This is a doll of Pig Ganon from the early Zelda games. This particular aesthetic has been largely left behind, and I think that's a crying shame. This is one of my favorite dolls I've ever made. I think it really pushes the limit of what a sock doll can be, so I'm just gonna jump in here and talk a bit about Zelda and stuff. The idea for this doll was almost completely inspired by a pair of socks I found in Target one day. These ones. Of course, what you're seeing here is just a black sock. This is the best way I know to make an underlayer for dolls. You know, that classic black void for mouths or eyes. It always bothers me to see a doll where a feature that's supposed to be under the skin sits on top of the skin. I know why manufacturers do that, but for a personal project, it adds so much more personality to have authentic layering. I've got so many socks that I buy on a whim where I think they could make really good doll patterns, and this one I looked at the triangles and the color scheme, and they reminded me of Ganon's original sprite, so I bought them. And what we can do is take the main sock. Look at this thing. Beautiful. I mean, the colors don't line up exactly with the original sprite, but I think they have that authenticity to them. They've got a Ganon feel. This isn't super clear across the Ganon iterations, but I imagine that he's got a major second chin situation happening. So I'm leaving a bit of fabric at the top to fold over and stitch along the top of the chest. So now we have a little pocket that we can stuff and stitch closed so the whole thing ends up looking like a whole unit. The opening of the sock I knew would be great for Ganon's mouth, so I'm stitching it over the black ball right around the opening of that elastic cuff. Most socks have that little padded cuff, but you want to be kind of wary. It's easy to run a needle through this part and pick out some of the elastic. Making faces like this is always a joy for me. I miss the look of those old games, with that cartoonish, muppety sort of vibe. These tusks were pretty cool. I'm building 2 small ones and 2 big ones. Making tiny pieces like this can be a hassle, especially the itty-bitty teeth in the middle. I'm just not patient enough sometimes, and you gotta be careful with the stitches or you'll end up with frayed edges sticking out. Since this point, I've started using t-shirt for teeth since it has a higher thread count and holds together more easily. If I'm honest, The Legend of Zelda has never been one of my favorite series, but I've gotten more into it over the last few years. Something I really appreciate about Nintendo in regards to Zelda is how they aren't dedicated to any one visual style. If anything, that's become kind of a staple of the series. Like a new game is announced and we all kind of wonder, ooh, what's it gonna be? You know, are we doing gritty? Are we going cutesy? Are we going to Candyland? What's happening? I feel like once Ganondorf was introduced, Ganon started falling to the sidelines. And even though that feeling is demonstrably unfounded, I still think that the fat pig version of Evil Incarnate deserves more attention. On that subject, and I've thought about this for a little while now, is there a connection in the Zelda universe between pigs and the forces of darkness? Do evil people transform into moblins? Were they a thing before Ganon, or did Ganon create a pig society in his likeness? Actually, now that I've asked that question aloud, it's not nearly as important a theory as I imagined.
Although I guess the moblins were more like bulldogs in the original game, but now I'm just probably overthinking things. The pig nose was fun to make as well. I got a lot more mileage out of the sock cuffs than I normally get in making a doll. I didn't even need to stuff it, I just tucked the tube in on itself and the padding kind of filled itself out. And since it was so stretchy, I was able to pinch it into more of a triangular shape as I stitched it on. Sock dolls for me are maybe 50% sewing and 50% sculpting. It's all about molding the sock into shapes you need and holding them in place. Another important factor for me in doll design, next to the fabric, is a good set of buttons. I played around with buttons that have holes versus solid buttons, and ultimately I liked these round, solid ones more. Let me say, I never played Zelda 2 until around 2019. But that game over screen in Zelda 2 is an iconic image. It's something I think of a lot when I think about Ganon, so I'm gonna go with the pupilless look to harken back to that effect. That was such a difficult game. I hope it's on the list of remakes for Nintendo down the line. I mean, if those hints that you got from the villagers, those ones that you needed to acquire in order to figure out the game, if those were easier to understand, it would have made the game so much more enjoyable. Like, as it is, I wouldn't recommend playing the game without a guide. Maybe that's because I'm an adult who can't sit down and play games like that anymore. But it's a cool concept, you know? The whole world is this puzzle that you piece together in a way that's unlike other Zelda games. And at the same time, it's not exactly like a Metroidvania either. I don't know. Zelda 2 has an interesting feel, and it'd be great of Nintendo to try it again. Okay, something else that grinds me up over store-bought dolls are that they lack individual fingers, but check this out. So, see how I cut this sock down the middle, and then I tuck the toe piece in on itself. Then, I stitch up the edge till I reach the fork where that toe meets. At that point, I want to stitch it into a Y shape. So at the end, we've got this fanned tip. I'm using some pins to make out where I want the fingers to separate, and stitch the shape of a thumb with the 3 fingers. Then just a quick few snips, and when we flip it right side out, you'll see that we have an absolutely gorgeous grubby mitt that we can stuff up and add to our doll. The foot we can make in roughly the same way, just forget the thumb. And at this point, the body is being assembled, and I'm really pleased with the way it's coming together. I think each part exudes personality, but maybe I've got ugly baby syndrome. Either way, I'm proud. It's honestly difficult for me to cover him up, but he does need clothing, so it's time to move on to that. I based most of my clothing design on Ganon's Link to the Past design. I picked up a bunch of knit socks that have these cool patterns on them which add some visual appeal. I'm not really experienced in making clothes, mostly because I don't understand patterns, but this is all fairly basic. This one piece is just a tunic. It's long in the center, with a wide tail for the back. So, I made it like this. with 2 pieces that wrap around the sides and meet in the back. We leave a hole on either side to fit the arms through and then just stitch it closed. At some point, I want to try making a Ganon based on his original game art, because it's hilarious. Like I said earlier, there's something really charming about that old aesthetic. Maybe it's nostalgia talking, but at the same time, I didn't play a lot of Zelda growing up. I was a little dumb knuckle dragger who couldn't understand the puzzles and was scared of the dungeons, so I didn't play a Zelda game the whole way through until Twilight Princess, which I think is regarded as one of the easiest Zelda games. But now, I'm a big brave man who listens to NPR, so my brain is big enough to complete these games. Can I touch on a random thing? I don't know whether this is an unpopular opinion, but I think Ganon's sprite in Link to the Past is bad. It comes off as overworked, like they weren't sure what part of him to focus on, and so, between the details and the colors, it's all muddy. But his artwork is clean. In contrast, I think Ganon's artwork from the Oracle games on Game Boy is gross. It's like bad fan art. But that sprite? Ugh. Damn! It's so nice. They weren't able to rely on conveying images through color palettes, so they clearly worked hard to make his sprite readable. I can't get over it. I remember playing Oracles and the Link to the Past GBA remake simultaneously, and I enjoyed the visual styling of the Oracles games a lot more. So with that said, I combined the looks of the Oracles Ganon and Link to the Past Ganon because I liked elements from both. I hadn't realized till now, but I have to say one of the best iterations for Big Ganon so far is probably the Amiibo Villager from Animal Crossing. Those spikes on his helmet are really great, so I want those to implement some metal. The skull is a classic touch. I didn't have anything large for the center of his chest, but I figured a little one on his belt was good enough. It's like, I don't know, a child's skull or whatever. He's evil. He eats kids, probably. I guess even to be a small human skull, Ganon would have to be enormous. I'm overthinking things again. That traditional beaded necklace adds so much to the ensemble, so I have to put that into my design. I'm not sure why Nintendo eased up on that over time. I missed them on Slippy, too, from the original Star Fox. His I don't know, I guess they're like Buddhist prayer beads. Whatever, I like them. But Star Fox dolls are for another video. This guy was great to build. I'm glad you stopped by and hung out, and I hope you keep making stuff. And I'll see you next time.